Welcome to another show, and we have a good buddy here, Al Landry. Al Landry and I go back just over a decade now when we worked over at Raytheon Missile Systems down in Tucson. And at that time, Al was, well, actually, you had retired as a colonel from the Army, if I remember correctly. And we would talk military stuff, but today Al is the owner of Untitled Holdings LLC, using his name Al, but he is also
you got that, you caught it. Good.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's a beautiful thing. It's kind of hard to miss with the big capital AL, right? Yeah. And then also he is the author of a best-selling book called Growing Mentor Intelligence, a field guide to mentoring. And I'll tell you what, Al is an incredible individual. So, hey, thank you for making the time, Al. Much appreciated.
No, man, thanks for giving me a platform to talk about the work, because it's more important now than it ever was, even back in the 10 years ago when you and I were working it. So
oh yeah,
I appreciate you and Gary giving me the chance just to chat a little bit about it.
For sure. It's a pleasure. And one of the things that I remember when we were working together is the fact that I could always go by your office and you were busy at work, but on top of that, there was always someone there. I shouldn't say always, but the door was always open for people to go and have a chat with you. And whether that be ex-military folk or any a day-to-day individual that was just looking for guidance and how to navigate the company or their work or what have you, and you always gave them that listening ear. And that's what I appreciate about you. I appreciated about you back then as we were in a corporation, because we really talked about mentoring, but then to see you really take that to heart. And there were multi-generations in your office, man. So what I know, as a colonel in the Army, that you had to be a mentor. You also had to be a strict leader. But when you take a look at your experience, how did the mentoring evolve rather? And can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy on mentoring?
Yeah, you bet. And truth be known, it's still evolving. I shrink back when I hear people talk about being an expert leader, expert mentor. Yeah. Usually that's a sign. It's really important. It's a sign that they've stopped learning and stopped growing because they think they have the answers. And my mentoring philosophy continues to evolve even to this day. I have some mentees I've had for 15, 20 years or more. Wow. And I learn more from them today than probably I've ever shared with them. But I want to hit your point about always seeing me in an open office. The most important thing for any leader to do is to set an example, not by their words, but by their actions. In the Army, we used to have a saying: a soldier may doubt what you say, they will never doubt what you do. And when I look around at a lot of leaders, they talk about open doors. And what the open door really means to them is, when my executive admin can get you on my calendar, if I have time, and if there's not another meeting or a priority, that's not an open door. That's a door that is convenient. And so putting into practice the things that I was learning is making myself available to people, and to create an inviting environment where people could feel comfortable regardless of who they were. I so appreciate you mentioned the multi-generational thing too, because part of my learning and the evolving was being open to things that I wasn't open to before, learning a lot on my own diversity journey, and appreciating that everybody has a story. And not only that, everyone has special gifts. And so the core of my philosophy around mentoring is about that. It's helping anyone that comes to me and asks me to mentor them, and I have to this day never told a person no, ever, ever. And I'll tell you about the young kid from Nigeria that found me on LinkedIn. But
Yeah.
seriously, that's another story. But the point is it's a privilege and an honor when somebody asks you to mentor them. And along the way, the most honorable and noble thing that a mentor can do is help another person find their noble purpose.
Yep.
To give it back. And that's where true happiness really is. And more than that, that's where legacy that counts is created. So that's kind of the core of it.
You know, I have to say this. When I was back there working with you, we had a new hire, and she actually helped you on your team. And now years later, she's a leader in that company. As I've seen, you know, how you get those little alerts. And I remember after I had left that company, I had spoken with her, and how you had continued to guide her. I haven't spoken with her in about a decade, but and to see, I think you know who I'm talking about over there, Lexi over there. But it's
God, yes,
yes, and
yes.
It's amazing to see what that leadership mantra on mentoring meant to her as well, but incredible navigation through a very complex organization, rightly so, just because, I mean, heck, they were defending the country, right? But it was amazing the things that you had taught. So I firsthand, I got to see what you did, mentoring someone that didn't directly report to you, right? Which was also amazing. You made that time. So yeah.
Well, there's a lot of evolving that goes on, but I want to tell you a story about one of my lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
I had the privilege of wearing the uniform for 26 years, and I was in air defense artillery. And in 93 to 95, I was privileged to command 243 ADA, a Patriot Battalion for 18th Airborne Corps. And one of my young lieutenants, I had 42 lieutenants, and they were all smarter than me. Ask them, they'd tell you. and they knew they could run the battalion better than me. Ask them, they would tell you. And I took mentoring them very seriously. In fact, I was so dissatisfied with the Army's evaluation process that I kind of morphed it a little bit, and I created. I asked each of my lieutenants before I would interview them as a senior rater to grade themselves in 25 different areas, A, B, C, or D. and then they would bring that into me, and I would sit down with them, and we would have a closure conversation about what they're doing great and areas where they could improve. And it was an open dialogue. And I really appreciated that. Well, flash forward to 2019. Now, over that period from 93 to 95, when I was commanding to 2019, I stayed in touch with a number of those officers. And one of them was a young gentleman named Kevin Kick. I don't think he would mind me using his name. And by that time, Kevin had risen to being a full colonel in the Colorado Army National Guard. Nice. And Kevin had appreciated the work that I had done in mentoring him. And he called me and he said, we could use your help with the Colorado Army National Guard. Would you come up here and do some work with us? So I spent 2 days up there with Kevin and the Colorado Guard's senior leadership, giving workshops based on my 2 books. You mentioned this one, Growing Mentor Intelligence. Yep. And by the way, I'm a photographer as well, and I took that picture in Sequoia. Oh. I couldn't think of a better way to capture what growth is all about than to pick something that, you know, you want to talk about a legacy. But a year later, so that was 2013, and 2014, I published a workbook. Nice. That has the same basic flow and chapter design, but it has spaces on the inside, so you can basically use it as a journal to document your talk. So anyway, I went up there and spent a wonderful 2 days with Kevin, being with the soldiers there and trying to help them in their mentor journey. And I reflected on that at some length. And in my book, I talk about reverse mentoring, where
Yes.
you as a mentor, you learn if you're open to it and your heart's open to it, to learning from your mentees. There's a level above reverse mentoring, and that's reversed advocacy and sponsorship, where your mentees reach out to you years or decades later, and they provide opportunity space for you and sponsor you into their organizations in places where you don't have access and would never have that privilege.
All right.
It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. And mentoring is a gift that just continues to give back. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Lexi as we go on, but I continue to work with Lexi to this day in an organization that I created. So we can talk about that, but go ahead.
No, questions? I'm just hoping you trademark reverse advocacy, because that is one cool word, man.
While I'm at it.
That's the name of my band. You guys can't steal that from me. So.
I love it, man. What do you play, Gary?
I'm totally joking. I don't have a band.
He doesn't play squat.
I don't do nothing. I play hooky from school. That's all I play. Well, I just have to say real quick, this is the first time I've met Alan when we started firing this up, and I just have to say, I'm kind of sitting back in awe, because the name of our podcast is Stoke Meter, and you are just the epitome of someone who is stoked, and it's fun and it's awesome to be able to talk to you. One of the questions I have is, it's a two-part question.
Sure.
And they're not related, but oh well. The first one is like, as a mentor, who are the people that guided your journey to become a mentor? Who were the people that you looked up to? And then the second thing, one thing that really stands out with our conversation here is that you're using the word mentor at a very, very deep level.
Yes.
Like sometimes we throw out, well, he's my mentor because he was a good baseball coach and I like baseball. But after the first question, once you answer that, talk a little bit about, what does mentoring mean to you? And how does that work? Because again, you're operating at like level 10 on this mentoring thing.
Great questions, Gary. And yeah, it's I guess I have to go back to my high school years. I was a lower middle class kid, second of 7 children in East Texas. The Exxon refinery was probably 5 miles from my home. I grew up smelling that smell that comes from a refinery close to your house. And from an early age, I knew that my future did not lie in my hometown. And it's a great town with great people, but I wanted to do something different with my life. I didn't want to go to work in a refinery, and I didn't want to sack groceries at Kmart and Walmart and all that stuff. And so academics was the key. I was always good in academics, and I can still tell you, my physics teacher was a guy named Gil Hodges. My chemistry teacher for both basic and advanced chemistry was a guy named Harold Brown. 3 English teachers that I worked with and actually won a National Council of Teachers of English Writing Award back in 1970, which provided a full tuition scholarship to Pepperdine University had I taken that up instead of going to West Point. You talk about polar opposites.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that.
Choose wisely. And I, instead of sacking groceries, I was actually allowed to work in a hospital as a 16-year-old kid in an X-ray department. And within a few months, they realized that I could do more than file X-rays, and they taught me how to take X-rays. So as a high school kid, I was taking call and X-raying people that were hurt and injured and ill. And then when it came time to college, and I had applied for the Army ROTC scholarship and had received it, they always were there for letters of recommendation and all that kind of stuff. And when it came time, West Point sent me some literature and said, you ought to consider going to West Point. Well, for me, East Texas kid, I'd never left the state. Here I am near 20 miles east of Houston, and I'd never even been to Louisiana before. What happens when you have 9 people in your family? Where do you go? You go to the park.
Yeah, outside.
So anyway, West Point sends me this stuff, and it's a lengthy process, from the nomination to the appointment and all the tests and everything. And my mentor stepped up, man. They stepped up, and they saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. I didn't know if I could be a leader, and if I could, what kind of leader I would be. And they saw that in me, and they gave me that opportunity to grow and to learn. And so from the time that happened to the time I graduated from West Point, still not knowing what kind of leader I would be, I was exposed to some of the very, very best that the world has to offer in my early years as a lieutenant through captain. And then as I moved up, I mean, and you talk deep. Deep is when you're still in touch with your boss, who was also my mentor in 1985 when I was a young captain in the Pentagon, and he's in his 80s. You talk deep when, Colonel Chuck Smith, who I talk about in my book, my dearest mentor, who passed about 4 years ago, shows up and has attended the weddings of all of our children.
Wow.
And came to my retirement. I get goosebumps just talking about it, because they taught me in the book, I mentioned this, they taught me what the right soup looked like. What does mentoring look like? Right. And then you've got the superficial level. I also had some real, can you say the word shitty on a podcast?
We've had worse. We've had worse.
Yeah. And some of them were actually worse than shitty, but I learned about mentorship, and I learned a lesson that I passed to our kids and passed to my mentees. You can learn something from anyone, whether it's how you want to be or how you don't want to be. And so I packaged all that through the years, and I've been a lifelong learner. So that piled in on all of this stuff, and then a willingness to learn and not be stuck by my own personality and limit it to people that are like me, but reaching out into the more diverse world and universe, and realizing that, to your point, Gary, the second piece is all the best mentoring I ever had is relationship based.
Yes.
The other stuff is coaching. The other stuff is important, and it needs to be done, but that's not having a deep, caring, and loving relationship with another person that can last a lifetime. And it's not too strong a word to say that I love these people that entered my life and have become part of it. And I try to give that back in return to each person that I mentor. I want to mention the kid from Nigeria. So I've always looked for a platform, which was why I was so excited to talk with you and Gary, because as an independent author, I am a one-man show, and I'm a real crappy businessman, because for me, this is about heart and soul.
Yes.
It's not about running a business or making a ton of money. And when you're self-published, you're not going to do that anyway, right?
Yep.
And so on LinkedIn, I created, in my profile, I have a video about my work, and a young kid from Nigeria saw what I was doing. He just graduated from college, and he sent me a message, and he said, "Would you mentor me?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Where can I get your book?" And I said, "You can go to Amazon and buy it, even in Nigeria." And he said, "I don't have any money." And so I spent $23 mailing him my book that he could have bought for $14 online, so he would have it to learn from it. Wow. And I don't do that to puff myself up. I do that to say, and Maurice, you know me, I love to write. And one of my articles on LinkedIn, I've written 13 articles on leadership and mentoring there. And one of them is called Intersections. And it's about what I call grace in action, where every opportunity to influence a person or be influenced by them is, you never know when the next person you meet might be the most impactful person in your life at whatever age you are. And so we're so busy doing shit, just doing stuff.
Yes.
That stuff doesn't matter. What matters is relationship. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that. So that's the reason it's deep. It's deep because it needs to be relationship based. Relationship based means it doesn't mean about me telling them what to do. You use the word guide. I guide through questions. It's a query-based approach, which is hard for an extrovert like me who wants to talk all. So my journey continues to this day. You can ask my wife. I have a long way to go.
Well, one thing I think that is real that kind of stands out to me, and we've seen this with some of our other people that we've interviewed that I consider excellent mentors, is you have the ability to not only learn from, I think you recognize that people are imperfect, and you have the ability to say, yeah, I like this about this person and I don't like that. I think so many times in today's culture, we paint someone with the broad brush and it's all or none. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean.
And I think that's unfortunate. I think people lose a lot of, one, excellent potential relationships like you're talking about as well, because they're just cutting people off right at the beginning. And I think that's too bad.
It is too bad. It's too bad. And it's such a deep question too, Gary, because what happens is when mentors aren't able to step outside of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So who do they reach out to? I call them the mini-me's. And they create their own self-licking ice cream cones. Really.
Yeah.
So yeah. And guess what happens? Not only do they do a disservice to those people, but they don't open themselves up to learning from a more diverse group. And some of the deepest learnings I've ever had came from people that, you said it, we're all imperfect. And I like to say we're perfect in our imperfection, because that gives us room to grow. And it does. And you learn so much more from people that are imperfect from you in a different way.
Yes. Al, that's truly one thing that I've appreciated. Well, there's many things I appreciate about you, but one of the things that really stands out as a beacon is the fact that you are willing to learn from anybody. And when I mean anybody, not only people younger, older, so on and so forth, but even people that are just mean to you. You always try to look at that. And I mean, at your level in the military and all that, you could have interjected the power play. But in the time that I've known you, I have never seen that. I have seen that deep commitment to dig deep, to learn, to see it for what it is. And all of a sudden, the mentoring isn't so much mentoring anymore as it is a dialogue of epic, lack of better words, epic proportions, because all of a sudden everyone benefits from that exertion to be able to get people on the same page. But it's not for the sake of being on the same page. It's now you can really start to help each other. Where you're at, you might disagree, but with that understood disagreement, I've seen you push past some pretty interesting circumstances, man.
So let's be honest here, right? So one of the things that really important part of all of our journeys is owning your mistakes and learning to be more mature. And so when I speak to some of my junior officers, from the 1990s, there were times I was an asshole to them. I was, I wasn't as far along on my mentor journey. And sometimes I created collateral damage that 25, 30 years later, I wouldn't do it the same way. Mm-hmm. And I had all the rationalization, justification in the world, because 2 weeks after I took command, I had to deploy my unit to the Middle East, and we were going in harm's way. And so I was a hard commander and I had high standards and all that stuff. But one of the things that I've learned to be able to do is to reflect. And it's just like I tell my mentees, go find somebody who's out of relationship with you, right? There, and find the kernel of truth in the reason for the breakdown. Right. And I look for that as well within my own self. What can I learn? And so truth in advertising, if I've risen above, it wasn't before I descended below first. Had my little hissy fit or whatever, and then realized that none of us are perfect and we can all grow. And when you accept that in yourself, then you can accept that in other people as well. That's so important.
And I guess this is where it goes into the next question. And I had no idea that you were dealing with cancer. I had none. And then
Neither did I.
Yeah. And so when I saw that, I thought, wait, what? Gary, was because I was trying to put times in, and he goes, hey, I got to come clean with you. This is what I'm going through. I go, wait, what?
I just wanted him to know they won't even let me have my phone in the hyperbaric chamber, man. So it's hard to Zoom from inside. Yeah, right.
And so that's one thing is I've found, well, I keep on saying one thing. There's many things about you, Al, that are incredible. And that is you've been unflappable in the face of opposition, obstacles, those types of circumstances. And I'm just wondering, in your current, I'd lack of a better word, testing event, if you will.
Good word.
What is it that you're learning through this process of bariatric chambers and everything else that they have to help you get past the cancer? And how have you applied that to teaching the people that you mentor? And what is it that they have learned through your learning journey? And then what have they taught you in return?
Yeah. So I was as shocked as anyone else. I didn't know that any other family member had ever had prostate cancer. We lost both my mom and dad within the last 10 years. And I lost a brother to lung cancer in 2010, and he smoked his entire life. And so that was another case of industry killing an innocent person, but that's another subject. So when I was diagnosed, actually a doctor saved my life. How it happened is I had a routine colonoscopy that I had delayed for several years. I should have had it sooner. And I go to my regular checkups with my primary care physician. So I just finished one in October. So this was January 2020. And when I woke up, from the colonoscopy, the doctor said, I'm not a urologist, but I felt some nodules on your prostate that you really need to get checked out. And so here it is in the middle of COVID. This is mid-March, 2020. And, I didn't want to go anywhere, but so that's one of the things that I learned was such a wonderful blessing of all the healthcare professionals that stepped up and became the heroes and took care of us when we needed it. So went through all the testing, diagnosis, and I was shocked the day that I found out that I had prostate cancer. Wow. And that I was going to have to undergo treatment. And it really messes with your mind, because from the time that I had the biopsy to the time of the diagnosis was basically 2 months. And the soundtrack that I had playing in my mind the whole time was, you can't have cancer. You don't have any symptoms. There's nothing else going on there. No one else in the family's ever had it, blah, 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 blah. And so I got to tell you, when Paula and I were sitting there with, Paula's my wife of 47 years, sitting there with the urologist, and he said, I'm not giving you a death sentence. He said, but you do have cancer. You have a tumor on your prostate. It's about 30%. And it's not something we need to take care of in a matter of weeks, but it is something we need to take care of in a matter of months. It was the first time in decades, honestly, that I had to reflect on the words that I've been telling every mentee of mine for the last 30 years, 40 years. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% what you do about it. And I've always been optimistic about life in general. And for me, that cup, and by the way, I didn't create that. When we were at Raytheon, and I think it was before you left, Maurice, we had that policeman from Phoenix who came and spoke to us, and he'd been involved in a horrible accident and horribly burned and disfigured, over 100 surgeries and all that. And he stood there in front of us and said that. And I was humbled and convicted by that statement, because it really is so true. So anytime I start feeling sorry for myself, I start thinking about the blessings that the 90% of what I do about it. More importantly than that, something that I had reached a decision, basically years ago. We in America, we have some things so totally backwards. So here I am, 69 years old, 68 at the time, diagnosed with cancer. And rather than retiring, I'm at a point in my life where I should be giving back more than I've ever given before, because I've learned more than ever before. And so I'm not the person to sit on my butt and just go and have vacations and stuff like that. That's why I sat down and wrote the book. And so rather than feeling sorry for myself, I just doubled down on some of the efforts that I was doing. You might remember that when I was at Raytheon, that I created a mentor group called ELSWIG, for Emerging Leader Strategy Work Group. And one of my failures in life was, and by the time I retired, we had about 100 people, 75 to 100, and mostly early generational employees that were there. They were hungry for authentic mentoring. And so once a month I would meet with them for an hour and a half. Maybe they came because I fed them Chick-fil-A. I don't know. And we would have candid conversations about life and about things that were important to them. When I left, I had worked with a couple of leaders, and I didn't want to see ELSWIG die, but within 2 years it was gone. And I was convicted by that. I didn't prepare the follow-on for my departure, my eventual departure.
Sure.
So in June of last year, after the killing of George Floyd, and working with some of my friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, I got back in touch with a group of people that were involved in ELSWIG before. And we spent 4 months curating a cohort of 20 people, 15 to 20 people. I created an advisory board of Raytheon people that have been working with me. And once a month at 7:30 Eastern time, we sit and we have conversations about social justice, about mentoring, about leadership, and about life. And we've created relationship with each other. And so I turn my frustration and disappointment and anger. I had some people that were helping me understand what grieving is all about, and turned it to some positive, constructive things. I'm continuing to work on my 3rd book, and we can talk about that later as well. But it's just about not feeling sorry for yourself and realizing that in some ways, cancer was a gift. What did I learn from it? I learned that I am, at the end of the day, like everyone else, really kind of insignificant, and that you have limited time. And that, like Gary said, we're all imperfect. So I try to work on those imperfections a little bit. And more importantly, I ask 2 questions. How do you define wealth? And how do you define legacy? Right. And when you reflect on that, there's nothing more important at the end of your days than your relationship with your God, yourself, and your family and friends. And so working on those areas is what gives me happiness. And so if I'm gone tomorrow, you know what? I'm going to go out with a bang. You can imagine that. It's going to be a bang.
There's no doubt.
You talk about stoking, man. I'm going to stoke that.
Oh, you've always been stoked. I love it. And I love ironically, it was just yesterday and the day before I was speaking with a youth group about how will you measure your life. It was based on that book by Clayton Christensen. And to your point, it's funny because it's easy to get in the winning aspect of life, right? I got to win this. And we did some exercises that showed how brutal just winning becomes, and without realizing that there's other people around along the way. And it actually ties in a lot with a lot of the guests that we've had prior to this. When you come together in a format like mentoring, there's so many more commonalities, man, right?
We're all human. We all have room to grow. We all have the ability to learn. And any effort that you apply toward mentoring not only adds coins into your tank, your bank of legacy, but it presents such an incredible joy. Just even talk about it. And when it's based on relationship rather than on telling somebody what they should and shouldn't do, you're building that relationship, and it makes you feel valued as you give them value in their life. And it really is defining wealth for me. And what I try to get people to realize is it is at the beginning and end, it's all about relationship. That's the most precious gift any of us could give each other, real, authentic, caring relationship. So
that's one of your questions. How would you answer the other one for yourself?
and what was the second one?
Well, you said you asked two questions. You say, how do you define wealth?
Oh, the other one is, how do you define legacy? What legacy do you actually ask it differently? How do you define wealth? And when you're gone, whether it's from your home, whether it's from your organization or job. So it doesn't have to have a strategic meaning. It can be applied to your workplace or your club or organization. But in the big book of life, when you're gone from this earth, what do you want left behind? And there's a great quote. I forgot the gentleman's name that created the clamshell computer, but he said, legacy is not what you give to someone, it's what you leave in them that matters. And there's a lot of truth in that. And I've talked to some very wealthy people. There was a wealthy gentleman, I'm sure he was a million or billionaire, whatever worth that is. And he's older than I am. And he said, I want to take you to task for something you talked about in your book. He said, you said that we ought to be giving this back and creating legacy. And he said, I've worked my ass off my whole life building up my wealth, and I don't feel an obligation or sense of responsibility to give it back. And I thought that was one of the saddest and loneliest comments I've ever heard from another human being. Yes. Because his definition of wealth is different. And I come from such a different universe where, like you said, I'm going to help anybody that ever asks me, ever. You know, just before we started this, one of my mentees sent me a note on Facebook, and she was cooking some fajitas and using a spice from a Texas guy, a chef that created a business. And she said, you got more friends than I do. Would you share it on your page? So 30 minutes before I did this, I wrote I'm happy to help. I'm happy to help.
So how do you answer those two questions? How does Alan answer those for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. So now that's one of the things I appreciate most in my smartest mentees. They will ask me those questions, and I appreciate that. So again, for me, I define wealth and legacy the same way. It's relationship. In my book, I talk about the whole person concept that I learned at West Point, that each of us is a unique creation in mind, body, and spirit. And and I'm not talking religion here at all. Yep. I'm talking spirituality, your soul. When you're aligned in those three vectors, that's what I call integrity. It's not telling the truth, it's telling the truth to yourself, and it's being whole. So for me, wealth is being aligned in all three of those areas and being surrounded with family and friends who love me, who are, again, I learned this from cancer, people that are willing to pray for me and wish me well, and the healthcare providers taking care of me. And legacy is when I go, I want to be remembered as an honorable man who gave his life in the service of other people, who lived life broadly and stoked all the time, who inspired other people to smile and to feel good about themselves, and to appreciate what beautiful and wonderful gifts that we've got. Now, and I need to tell you another thing that was really important. So the other thing that I did is in August, I have 1,900 Facebook friends, and I was really, really angry at how low a number of them had gone in the political conversations, divisiveness and anger and name calling and judgment and all of that stuff. And so rather than just sit there and cancel them or whatever the word is today, I said, I'm going to try something opposite. As a as an amateur photographer, I had collected nature photography for 20 years. And I said, I'm going to post one photograph a day. And I did it for 365 days.
Wow.
And I wanted to give people something that, in a way, it became a way for me to share my vision about spirituality and the blessings of having an earth that's so beautiful. And so nobody could complain about, no name calling. And I had a cohort of people. I just finished the 365th day, and I'm taking a little break now. And when you go back and look at my Facebook profile, you'll see the over 400 photos that I posted there. Again, just to do something instead of talking trash, and do something. Say hi to somebody, smile, do something constructive and positive. Stop feeling sorry for yourself, and don't fight fire with fire, fight fire with love. Give it back, give it back. So that's how I answered the question.
Love it. Love it.
It's fantastic. And you did leave another teaser out there though, Al. And that was, you never told us what happened with the individual in Nigeria.
Yeah. So he asked me to mentor him, and we talked about the book, and I mailed it to him, and just making sure he got it took a couple of months. When he did get it, he read it, and he's continued to reach out to me on LinkedIn to ask me how I'm doing, to pray for me and share for me, and to ask me if I can help him in mentoring him in some ways. He had written a poem about the violence in Nigeria, and I helped him edit that poem to be more palatable to an English-speaking audience. He speaks English well, but he needed some work on it. And so we stay in contact with him, and when he reaches out, I try to reach back to him when I can. But he's doing well by all intents and purposes, and he's doing some volunteer work as well. He's read my book, and he's trying to share the story and mentor as well. So
that's fantastic.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, you talk about legacy. That's legacy multiplied, right? That's legacy multiplied, and you see it over and over and over again. All I have to do is look at your LinkedIn or Facebook profile, and it's obvious. And
you read Clay Christensen. You were talking Clay Christensen's book, and Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point.
Yep.
Some years ago. And because I've always loved science, the whole notion of creating critical mass is something that not only appeals to me from a scientific method, but appeals to me in a social perspective. And so, what I've tried to do with my books and with my mentoring is create critical mass. We've lost decency. We've lost humility. When I see political leaders of both parties that do things that I would be embarrassed to tell, if my mom knew that I had done any of those when she was still alive, I would be embarrassed, totally embarrassed. And we've lost that sense of decency and respect, and all life is precious. And it's just about, in Kosovo in 2000, when I was chief of staff, I was a colonel, full colonel, chief of staff of Task Force Falcon. We were there as part of a United Nations multinational task force. And we were trying to keep the Kosovar Serbs from killing the Kosovar Albanians, and the Kosovar Albanians from killing the Kosovar Serbs. And any one of them could give you 700, 800 years of history of blood feuds as to why the other side was jacked up and why they deserved to die. The second week I was there, a little 2-year-old Serbian girl was shot and killed because she belonged to the wrong ethnic group.
Oh man.
That hurt my soul as a father and grandfather. And I have no appreciation for how evil man can be against fellow man, and you dehumanize them, and it starts with a joke and it moves to this and that and the other, which is the reason why this old ball white colonel has made such progress in his own diversity and inclusion journey. I've worked with the GLBTQ community and dealt with stories of rejection from their family members. There's nothing more vile than a family, parents rejecting their children. And so it's just about giving love back and believing it, not in the mushy sense, but in the sense that it matters, and that's where legacy lies. And I'll tell you the secret. That's nirvana.
Yes.
That's where heaven on earth is. It's in your heart and your soul. And it's when you feel whole. I get goosebumps just talking about it, because it's the radiation from your spirit that makes other people feel valued and respected and appreciated. So it's and it's so easy. Just suspend judgment.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of why you're so successful at, and I think this is something that we can all learn, and this is something that just kind of hits me as you've been talking, is you find what you look for.
You find what you look for. I love that quote, Gary.
You know what I mean? Because you're looking for that in people. You're not looking for what's wrong. You're looking for, like, how can I love this person? How can I connect with them, you know, and make them better, and therefore make you better? I mean, that's incredibly powerful.
It's so powerful. And there's another article I wrote on LinkedIn called a couple of years ago called "The Rise of the Anti-Mentor." How I've seen extremely successful people that are still scarred from the effect of anti-mentors in their lives, that instead of buoying them up and lifting them up and sponsoring, talked about their weaknesses and their inadequacies. And
Sure.
HR departments are doing that all over the globe today. And performance evaluations, and companies are out there, and instead of focusing on the goodness of people and trying to find that kernel and the areas where we all need improvement, saying that's just being human. Let me put you with somebody who can help you with that. Yeah. We judge them, and then we char them for life. It's unconscionable. It really is. But you find what you're looking for, Gary. That's exactly right. So,
and I think, you know, when I asked you earlier, you know, kind of your mentor journey and the people that made a difference in your life, another reoccurring theme that you see over and over again is it usually starts out kind of in the teen years, where you find whether it's a teacher or a coach. I don't know, the whole youth, the state of youth is something that I'm always sensitive to.
yeah.
How do we reach our kids? How do we start them on a mentor journey? That, because sometimes it's so simple as just saying, you know what, Maurice, you're dang good at that. You know, or you should try this. You know, I mean, I look back, I was a scrawny little dude in middle school, and I used to run cross country, and I just did it because I didn't want to work on the ranch. So it was, you know how that goes. But I remember one day, you know, someone said, "Hey, you're getting kind of tall. You know, you're pretty good. I think you're kind of quick. Why don't you try hurdles?" You know, I'm like, okay.
It's not cows.
Yeah, it's not cows. I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, but you know, I ended up being very, very successful at it. But it just took someone to recognize something. Yes. You know, I mean, so in your opinion, as an expert, and I'll call you an expert, whether you like it or not, an expert with room to grow. How do we reach? How do we reach our kids? How do we reach youth?
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer that is right or wrong, but I reflect on that a lot with my grandkids. Paula and I are blessed with 4 adult children, 2 active duty serving, and 2 daughters, and 11 grandchildren. And I reflect on the grandchildren and how they're growing up. They're young. The oldest is 16, down to 2 years old. And I think the simplest answer I would give you, Gary, is we need to talk to them. We don't talk to them anymore.
Yep.
We shunt them. We give them an electronic device. We give them a phone. We put them here. We put them there. We saturate them with information. We saturate them with expectations. We're so busy in our, you know, as Maurice and I both know, in places like Raytheon, which is a great company. Most of the couples that are working, but you know, both the husband and the wife have to end up working, and so they have to give childcare to somebody else. My wife is a teacher. She sees it at school. She's a kinder teacher, and even at that young age, parents are dropping off their kids like it's a daycare facility. We don't talk to our kids. I mean, talk about things that are important. important. We don't tuck them in at night. We don't say prayers with them. We don't teach them how to be respectful. We don't teach them how to listen. And hell, half of us don't know how to listen. And if you're like me, it's a struggle anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's or from an early age, teaching them that most important life lesson, that no one on this earth has a right to judge another human being. You don't have that right.
I
It's
love that.
about dignity and respect for every person. And that when you accept that they're different, then you start saying, you know what? I was privileged to speak at a conference in Chicago here a couple of years ago, and it was about merging how do you work with multi-generational groups and mentor them. And I said this, it's back to one of the points you raised earlier about how a lot of times leaders will surround themselves with people that are just like them.
Yeah.
And I said, imagine this now. So that's if you take people that are a certain person. I'm an ENTJ on Myers-Briggs. That's a certain color thread, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I go to my own preferences, all the other threads in my fabric and my rope are going to be ENTJ, brown threads. That's going to be us. Okay. And the rope is strong, but it's not very diverse. It's not very beautiful. And imagine this, if instead of a rope, that we treat each personality as a different color fabric, and we create a tapestry from it.
Yep.
And that tapestry is beautiful and has multiple uses, and you can do so much more with it and learn so much from it.
Yeah.
And so people are learning how to be bigoted, how to be racist at home in early ages. They're learning how to be judgmental at early ages. And if the parents don't intervene and serve as a counterbalance to that kind of stuff, I fear for the next generations. I really do.
Al, there's a thing that has struck me through the course of this discussion on mentoring, and it's evolved, of course, but what's interesting is that in everything that you've done, from art to the military to, and what I mean by art, by the photography and such,
Yeah.
the pictures are beautiful because not everything was green. Not everything was a water picture. It wasn't just the sky. It was a tapestry of everything.
Yes.
And that's what made it. And then I started, as I was thinking more and more about that and the diversity of people that you mentor, all of a sudden the thought of the orchestra came on. Everyone isn't playing a drum. Everyone isn't playing a brass. And
Yeah.
I think that not only mentoring, but just seeing people for who they are
Right.
is something that really is valuable, because we do all have that inherent value. And of course, this wasn't meant to be a kumbaya podcast by any means, right? but when you look at what true mentoring is, it does convey that that unity by understanding that the differences can make up that man, what not the euphoria, but essentially that place of peace that everyone's probably looking for right now. we're really harping on the differences rather than mentoring and learning from each other. Let's
even bring it to out of the kumbaya and into the practical. I'm a strategist by nature as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And it used to drive me just freaking crazy when people would say, well, we're always looking for competitive advantage. And
right.
I don't care what industry you're in, you got competitors, right? And I'd sit back and I'd look at it from a strategic perspective, and especially coming from 26 years in the Army, where there's no doubt the most valuable and precious resource that we had in the military is the precious treasure of this great nation that moms and dads send in terms of selfless service, and they take an oath of office to serve and support and defend the Constitution, right? So you have that purpose. And then I get to companies and I get with industry, and I'm looking at this, and they're taken by their technology, or they're taken by their scientists, or they're taken by their programs, or they're taken by their financials or whatever. And I'm like, y'all are being dumbasses, because your advantage is in your people. And if you will just take a little bit of time and energy, And in fact, those are the programs that organizations tend to cut first.
Yes,
When
yes,
there's
always.
And
Yep.
it's just a great, Maurice and I used to talk about this because it's so counter-strategic. You will get a tactical gain with a strategic fall because you are a penny wise and a pound foolish. Invest in your people, give it back. From the practical sense, what I'll tell you too is, as a strategist, the most effective teams that I ever saw were the most diverse teams. And the least effective teams I ever saw were the ones that were full of mini-me's, because they already know what the boss thinks and all they're interested is kissing the boss's ass, and the boss doesn't want to know anything different. So they always go the way the boss goes, right? That's not an effect. That's not effective. Broaden out and reach out and create a diverse team and learn from each other. And the insights that you will gain, whether it's a church or school or organization or home, they're going to be powerful in your organization. They're going to take it to the next level. And that's how you create a high-performing team. Then you can have kumbaya after you win.
Well, and I don't know. I think it's so interesting because that's something that consistently, over and over again, corporate America or corporate whatever has never learned, and they keep forgetting, is focus on the people, focus on the, I mean, they're your biggest asset. It's crazy. In healthcare, one of the things that I see a lot is they're always going after, it's all about patient satisfaction. It's all about patient satisfaction. So we're going to tell our team what they have to do and how they need to do better to demand what they do so that we have patient satisfaction. I'm like, well, let's focus on the staff. Let's focus on the people. Show them that we love them, that we care about them. All that garbage will follow. It's like I'm not that smart. How have we not figured that out?
I'm going to give you the answer, because the answer is all part of this whole business about what you value, how you define wealth, and what you respect and what you don't respect. We've lost the importance of humility in leadership.
Sure.
Humility is realizing you don't have all the answers. Whatever title you want to put yourself in, humility is realizing that the day will come that you don't control when you're 6 feet under.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Leave you left behind. And when you get humbled enough about that, astronomy and photographs, by the way, will help you get there real fast when you realize how vast the universe is. But it's about being humble in the face of success.
Yeah.
You can be successful and you can be proud and you can be confident and you can be competent, but you don't have to be arrogant and you don't have to be brash and you don't have to be disrespectful. And so it's about being humble enough to learn. You see me, every time I'm sitting here taking notes.
I think there's huge power as a leader in being able to say, I don't know.
My God, just last week, somebody posted asked me my opinion on this stuff about make it till you break, fake it till you make it. And I commented, I said, I can't think of a worse statement for any leader to ever say to another person, because it's so negative in so many ways, because the person will never learn. And by the time they're in the positions that long, there's going to be an expectation that they know and that they're competent, when we all know inside they've been faking it. And I'll tell you what, the younger generations, they can smell out a fake 100 feet away.
Oh, yeah.
They want authenticity, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Stop that BS. Tell people what you don't know, like you're saying, Gary. And guess what? Your people will love you for it, because they're going to appreciate that even if you're their leader, that you're willing to admit what you don't know and to learn from them so they can help you. There's power, enormous, elegant power in that too.
It does go back to that humility statement that you said, right?
It does.
It really does. It really does. Man, Al, there are so many things that we could be talking about. Your wealth of knowledge is immense, but even more so, the ability to touch people's lives in a positive fashion. It's exemplary, and I thank you for it. So,
and I'm going to say right now, I always do. We got to do this again real soon.
Oh man,
Yes.
there's more.
There's more,
And I
there's a
can't
lot
wait,
more.
Al.
Anytime, guys, and thanks for what you're doing, because there are a lot of people out there like me that are just looking for a platform.
Yeah.
You know,
Anytime.
Help tell
Anytime.
the story. Yeah.
Real quick in closing, let's give you a little leverage to leverage who Alan is. Show us your book. How do we get it? What do we do with it?
Go on Amazon. It's Growing Mentor Intelligence, a field guide to mentoring, Alan D. Landry. And before you buy it, don't buy it. Read the 47 reviews and find out what people are saying about my work and how diverse the responses are. And that, in my mind, is a quality book that can touch different people in different ways, and they all pull something constructive and positive. Then if you figure that that book is worth $14.99, realize that I'm going to get $6 of that, and I will be forever grateful for that $6, and I promise you to put it to good use.
Oh, you're gonna be $6 richer in about 30 minutes, just so you know.
Well, thank you. And more importantly, for everybody that's a leader or views themselves as a leader, make yourself available as a mentor. Reach out to other people. Take that first step, and don't belittle your own skills and your own talents and believe that you can't do it, that it takes a person like me who's outgoing and all that kind of stuff. That's a bunch of crap. It's hard for me to mentor because I'm such an extrovert. If you're an introvert, you got an inside game because you know how to listen, and I don't. Well, that's my plan.
Al, again, thank you for your time. This has been fun and fantastic all at once, man. So we will catch you on the next bounce, okay?
Sounds good. You guys take care and be blessed.
You as
You too.
well.